Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rick Ackerman, editor of the newsletter Rick's Picks, his website rickackerman.com. He's speaking to us from South Florida. Welcome back to the show, Rick.
Indeed a pleasure, Jim. Thanks for inviting me on.
Rick, the stock market, I'm calling it kind of a step-down bear market. It's up for a day, and then for 2 or 3 days it steps down, then it comes back, but not quite to where it was before. Is this suckering people in to put more money into what could be a losing stock market?
No, I don't think, I think the market's in a churning top here. It's in a broad top, and it's very hard to pick the top to get short. Everybody knows that the bear market is a little long in the tooth. So we're all trying to get short. I missed by a few ticks this morning. I was using a target of 4421.50 on the E-mini S&Ps. But when you see how resilient, which is to say blithely oblivious, the index futures are today to whatever the dangers or perceived dangers of Ukraine, you get a feeling we're going to blow higher as soon as the air is clear, if such a thing were possible with Ukraine. So my next target is it's almost 200 points above here on the E-mini S&Ps, which means we could get a Dow rally of 2,000 points. Not for any good reason, of course, and that wouldn't quite get us to new all-time highs. But market's just kind of jacking around, wait until everybody's in, and what's happening now is distributive with respect to the money managing chimpanzees who make things go up and down.
In a situation like that, do you cash out and just hold on to your dough and wait for the market to settle out? What's your strategy?
Yeah, there's no reason to stay in it to kind of milk the rally, the distribution for the last drop. You know, we've been talking about the alternative strategy, and it would have done you just fine if you'd been in a bit ago. It's a barbell, what I call a barbell, using Treasury bonds versus gold. And Treasuries have had an amazing rally here, and I'm still expecting higher interest rates, which means lower prices on T-bonds, so it's not exactly the optimal time to get in. I'm looking for 3.01% on the 30-year, so we're not quite there, but I do like bonds versus gold for your all-weather hedge.
Yes, now, usually in uncertain times, the situation in Ukraine, gold would have taken off, but really I haven't seen a big reaction from it. Will there be one?
Gold has not reflected even an ounce of concern over geopolitical crises since the Soviets rolled their tanks into Czechoslovakia. Gold is really, it's in a bull market holding pattern, and I keep saying that something big has to change before gold really takes off. I think it's certainly resilient enough to spook bears whenever it wants, spook the shorts, but since we know they're in charge of the game anyway, the bullion bankers, you can't really scare them much. So gold just waiting for its opportunity. And although I can't tell you what the event will be that causes that watershed change that puts gold in a full-blown bull market, just like we experienced in the FANG stocks. But I can tell you that one of the symptoms of that sea change will be that portfolio managers will wake up one morning and think, my God, what have I done? and they'll want to be out of stocks. But what will cause them to think that way is beyond speculation.
Now, the Dow, the NASDAQ, the S&P, we've seen some major companies have big failures. The tech companies came tumbling down. Have they recovered, or has it finally become a time where, just because it's a FANG stock, it's not going to be a winner?
Well, the chimps, the portfolio managers, they just have their themes, and they'll play a theme for a while, and for no particular reason, they'll say, we're gonna go off value stocks and we're gonna go into growth. So they keep rotating in groups, and of course they do that because their research department can put out these reports that provide whatever reasons, whatever cover you need to make these changes, modifications, and changes in allocations. So it's not a question of whether the companies themselves will come back. Apple and Google and Facebook and all the others are doing the same stuff they always did, and it's in some cases it's just as lucrative. But that doesn't matter. It's really just the perception and the flavor of the month or year in allocation strategy that matters.
Mm-hmm. So where are people allocating their money right now?
Well, certainly we've been away from the tech stocks, and there's been a push into energy stocks. That's not exactly rocket science. And the commodities are still going nuts, so we've got some emphasis there. I'm looking right now at a chart of the NASDAQ, the E-mini NASDAQ 100, and it looks to be kind of an inverted head and shoulders, which is pretty bullish. So I think they're setting up for another move, although I hesitate to say we're going to get new all-time highs.
Now, with oil, even Alberta crude, it has topped $100 a barrel. Brent, I think, 113. West Texas crude, 110. How much higher can this happen? And again, this is all speculation because world oil supplies haven't been touched.
Yeah, I mean, the oil thing is, you can see it's the short squeeze on crude has gone to a bit of an extreme. It's hard when you try to think it through from the supply-demand side. Crude is impossible. And who knows really what there was. Someone told me there was a story in a journal about that the reason prices are so high is because the ships that transport oil have become uninsurable to the extent that they're doing shipping business with Russian ports. So I don't know. I mean, everybody tells a different. Every expert has a different story about why crude prices are so high. But literally, where the rubber meets the road, when you go to the pump. Yesterday, I filled up at Costco, and it was I think close to $4 a gallon. That's probably the best gas price around. This is for high octane, and keep going. That can't go on forever. I mean, sooner or later, if crude is actually on its way to 200, as some have forecast, then is the pump price going to be so high that nobody drives anymore? And of course, we're a very driving-oriented country, but there'll be a lot less of it at those prices. So you see within this inflation spiral just the seeds of deflationary destruction. The only thing supporting higher prices right now is, in the case of stocks, steady asset values, but other things like insane real estate values, that they're the things that are actually feeding the inflation, since we never actually see these quote unquote dollars that the Fed is gushing into the system. You haven't seen a dime of that other than the paltry $1,400 COVID check that you may have gotten. So the money really has to be borrowed into existence, and we borrow against certain assets, and that's why a bear market will snuff this inflation overnight.
Yeah, in the Vancouver area, Vancouver's got the highest gasoline prices in North America. It's due to taxes. We have an 18.5 cent per liter transit tax, for example, that nobody else has. And they're saying Vancouver could be $2 a liter by next week. That's $7.60 per U.S. gallon.
Yeah, and you'll, even if you don't, you think, screw it, I'll just fill up the tank and drive anyway and pretend I won't even look at my charge card statements for all that gas. But even so, it feeds into the air transport. Someone put a figure in my chat room the other day that every penny cost Delta Airlines, every penny increase in jet fuel price cost Delta Airlines something like, I don't know what it was, $24 million maybe. So higher fuel prices, you could say, yes, it's feeding inflation everywhere, but we're at a threshold where the demand will begin to diminish. And when you get that detumescing effect, the same thing could happen in the stock market. You don't expect the stock market to collapse one day, and that's the beginning of it. You expect it to the bull market to kind of peter out when demand ceases for shares.
We'll have more with Rick Ackerman right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rick Ackerman. Rick, Russia is one of the big sources of uranium for all the power plants around the world that use it. Are they going to cut off supplies in reaction to all the sanctions?
Well, the securities markets certainly think they will. You know, one proxy for uranium goes under the symbol UUUU, and it's gone just over the last week and some from $6 to $9. So we've had a 50% increase in this, and it's amazing just how opportunistic the markets have been of any news at all that would seem to suggest that the supply of this or that will be somehow curtailed. So you know, you don't have organic forces of supply and demand in the underlying commodities feeding this nutso movement in commodity-based issues. But I think I don't really understand the uranium market. I guess it's partly captive of geopolitical trends and fashions, and if the demand is there, I guess it has to come from countries that want to go nuke. But nobody's talking about that seriously. Even the Germans, who want to sort of back off their wind power, solar power thing a little bit.
Food. We've already seen the price of food across the planet has skyrocketed. Russia and Ukraine, major suppliers of grain to the planet. And Ukraine, for example, makes, I think, 80% of the world's sunflower seed oil. All things that I don't know how vital that is to the food market, but it's certainly important to them. What's going to happen with food prices if these things get choked?
Well, you know, the food prices, the grocer has almost has somewhat mimicked the action in the market. I just mentioned that the lifting of prices is so viciously opportunistic of rumor and headline right now, and the grocers are doing the same thing. They're thinking, well, the newspapers are filled with stories about inflation. Let's make our move now. So these scumbags have done, you know, they've inflated prices way beyond what would be justified. And you see it. You see it not only in the deceptive packaging, where 16 ounces is now a 12-ounce package. Sometimes they don't even bother to change the package itself. Whatever's inside of it simply has more space. So there's been, you know, you go to the grocer and whatever you're paying now, you're thinking, how high can it go, and when do you stop buying certain things? So I think we're at that point. Really, there are just so many things in the on the grocery shelves that are insanely overpriced right now that people are going to start substituting cheaper, and you may even have a few grocery retailers out there who get the brilliant idea that if they compete a little bit harder with better prices, they'll do better. So I just don't see grocery lettuce bin inflation going on to infinity.
Well, in Canada, you're absolutely right. Frito-Lay, which is owned by PepsiCo, is in a price battle with Loblaw, the biggest food chain in Canada. Loblaw refused to pay their higher prices, and Frito-Lay has cut off their supply of familiar potato chips and things like Cheetos. And Canadian manufacturers now are stepping in with their products, and perhaps customers will like those more, and PepsiCo and Lay's won't get that market back.
Yeah, that's good. That's a little bit of insurrection there on the demand side. And I just think we're going to see more of it.
So, Rick, I guess you have to give us an overall picture here, the markets, inflation, interest rates.
Well, I mentioned earlier that I'm looking for 3.01% on the 30-year, which means even though we had this spectacular rally in treasuries, we got another leg down before rates reach a point where they're going to choke off all forms of commerce. So there, and looking at an even bigger picture than the bonds, the dollar, nothing could be more threatening than a strong dollar. And we've been talking for long enough that that I have never wavered on my bullishness on the dollar. It really comes out of my deflationist perspective that we're not going to elude all the debt that we've run up simply by inflating it away to oblivion. So each time the dollar moves higher, everybody who owes dollars is going to be more burdened to pay back their debts. And the formulation that I usually use comes from C.V. Myers, Vern Myers, that speaking of deflation, he says, ultimately, every penny of every debt must be paid, if not by the borrower, then by the lender. So when you get, it's easy for the Fed to run counter to that by inflating assets, but let them try to inflate the collapsing Illinois pension system, which is going to be maybe one of the first real crises where we discover that the government can't simply print checks every month and send them out to 3.5 million Illinois retirees when the rest of the country is not getting its checks. So, all right, so to come back to the dollar, the dollar is the one market. It's just too big to control. The Fed can pretend, and all the central banks together really are pretty puny compared to the forces that are being unleashed in the dollar right now in a deflationary way. The last thing anybody wants is for a stronger dollar. Nobody wants that. And it means that anybody who buys energy with dollars is not even getting socked just by rising fuel costs, by the price of oil, but by the fact that the dollars they need to pay for energy are much dearer. So the most threatening thing that's happening right now, and it's not Ukraine and it's not COVID, it's really the strong dollar. And let all the inflationists explain why, with all the blather and the headlines about inflation, why does the dollar just keep going up? And the reason is it doesn't care what the Fed is doing or what anybody else is doing. It's simply visiting it's telling all the borrowers a day of reckoning is coming.
Rick, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Always a pleasure, Jim. I know a lot of what we talk about is pretty dark, but I have to say I'm enjoying Florida weather and doing a little bit of sailing, playing golf. It's a good time for it here because it's not yet the summer heat. So anyway, I'm enjoying life, even if our discussions are a little bit we're talking about things that are threatening, and I think we're really in the maelstrom right now.
Well, weather-wise, Vancouver's the tropics of Canada. We're at 10 or 50 degrees, while the rest of the country is still well below zero. Celsius. Yeah. That's why we have palm trees on our beaches here. We really do.
I don't think of Vancouver as a place with palm trees on beaches, but if you say so.
Absolutely. I'll send you a picture.
The semi-tropical paradise of Vancouver.
Well,
okay, well,
okay.
I'll look forward to your card.
Well, we are a rainforest, that's for sure. That's why we have 300-foot tall trees.
Uh-huh.
Rick, thanks again for being on the show.
Well, thanks for inviting me on, Jim, and I'll look forward to our next conversation.
My guest has been Rick Ackerman, editor of the newsletter Rick's Picks, his website, rickackerman.com. If you have any questions for Rick or any of our guests, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. We'll ask that question for you. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter @HowStreet. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.